I have a daughter. She's in 3rd grade, or was in 3rd grade. She's now in 6th grade, and her 3rd grade math teacher told her she was not good at math. I actually proceeded to march into that school and talk to that 3rd grade math teacher and said to her, every day you're going to tell my daughter she's good at math. So when I started in the 1980s, as I think back, there were no women in senior leadership positions.
There weren't very many women. And it's interesting though, when I think about my career, there have been many times when I've been one of the few or the only woman in the room.
When I chose nursing, it was because I had some limited choices. There was an expectation when I was growing up that women became a nurse or a school teacher.
When I graduated from college in 1970, I remember opening the want ads in the San Francisco Chronicle, and here's how the jobs were listed. Men wanted, married women wanted, single women wanted. You would not see that today.
I have to say that there were times, especially early on when I was working as an analyst at the Office of Naval Intelligence, that I would notice that maybe I am different. I would notice in group situations where there would be men and women in that group, and we would be talking about, name the subject. I would notice that I wasn't getting the same eye contact as some of my male counterparts, that questions weren't coming to me that went to my male counterparts.
When I first entered the field, although I had been published and had done the first nationwide research on telemedicine, I got the question a lot of times, why are you in this field? And I couldn't tell if that was real curiosity or kind of rhetorical, you should doubt yourself, why are you in this field?
I was not always what the customer expected when I showed up, or I wasn't always what maybe a partner expected when I showed up.
I see all the time women doing 2/3 of the work for 1/3 of the pay, and playing leadership roles that when they have a leadership role, it's almost always the vice president of marketing. You very rarely see women in positions of very senior authority in business development or in other such areas. And I think it has nothing to do with their skills and ability. I think it has to do with a set of cultural norms, things that we have in our mind for what a VP of sales should be, or what a finance leader should be. And I think that that's just completely wrong-headed.
I won the primary in such a Democratic seat. It was expected that I would win in the general, and I did. So my husband and I came out to kind of figure out the scene, and Congressman Don Edwards, my predecessor, took us to lunch. And we're eating in the members' dining room with Congressman Edwards, and Henry Hyde walked by. He was the Don Edwards' ranking member, and he said, "Henry, I'd like you to meet the person who's going to replace me in Congress." And Henry stuck out his hand to my husband to shake his hand. And I thought, well, okay, welcome to Washington.
I have a very interesting story. Later on in my career, I was meeting my new boss, who at the time was very preoccupied. He didn't even look up from the papers that he was reading when an introduction was made. Some people would have looked at that opportunity as, this is a horrible man. I walked out of that office saying, this person is going to know me before this year is over, and sure enough, he did.
There have definitely been times when people assumed that I was just there to hand out copies of the presentation, or people assumed that I was just there to initiate the dial-in for the conference call. That's definitely happened. And it probably will continue to happen, and you just deal with it in the moment and move past it, because what can you do?
Most of the criticism I heard of Hillary Clinton, rooted in her gender, came from societies and from leaders who are used to women being the ones who came in and poured the tea. In foreign policy, it oftentimes was white guys with white shirts and red ties talking to other white guys with white shirts and red ties, pinstripe suits, flag flying in the background, and the women are the ones who make the appointments and who bring the coffee. Hillary definitely threw things off for a lot of people who were used to that and who liked it.
What does Mr. Clinton think through the mouth of Mrs. Clinton. And what does Mr. Mutombo think on this situation? Thank you very much.
Wait, you want me to tell you what my husband thinks? My husband is not the Secretary of State, I am. So you ask my opinion, I will tell you my opinion. I'm not going to be channeling my husband.
Now, she had just spent an earlier part of the day in the Magunga refugee camps north of Goma, in one of the most violent places in the world where sexual violence is rampant. And so she had spent the day in the camps, and she had spent the day with women who oftentimes had been raped repeatedly. And then for her later in the day to get a question from this man asking what her husband thought, you know, you could definitely see her blood begin to boil.
I would be lying if I said it wasn't a bit frustrating. I wish there were more young women in this industry. I really do. Do I necessarily know the answer to that question? I think it's complex as to why there aren't more young women in the field.
You know, it's not an easy field. I mean, engineering is a rigorous course of study, and not everyone who starts it of any gender always finishes. I also think it's tough when you walk in and, you know, there's 50 people and they're all guys except for you. It's not always a welcoming situation, and so that hurts as well. When I walk into a room for a meeting and it's 15 people and there's 2 women, including me, you draw a little bit more attention to yourself. People are going to notice that there's a young woman in the room surrounded by 13 men in their 40s and 50s, right? You just stand out naturally.
I guess part of this question about women going into STEM careers, I think there is fear of the unknown. I think we as women assume that we're not going to be the smartest one in the room, and so we hold ourselves back. I think we have to develop courage and be a little fearless. Because the reality is, it took me 20 years, but I soon realized I was the smartest one in the room.
In order for people to rise to the top of organizations, whether it's a government organization or whether it's a private sector organization, it requires mentoring. And it requires people at the top looking out for people who are rising talents. And all too often I see the people who are in charge today, you know, the men with gray hair or flecks of gray in their hair, mentoring other young men and being wary of mentoring younger women. And I think that's a problem, because what that does is it puts the burden for mentoring a very large number of promising young women on a very, very small number of accomplished older women.
Being a one of or a first many times as a woman, I didn't have often a female mentor. And the men who did help me, they were terrific. They pushed me. Sometimes they pushed me in ways that I didn't really like. I had to be as good or better. And that I think that saying is overused and it sounds a little trite, but it's true. If you're going to be in the minority, you need to be better than the rest, or at least as good as.
What has changed today is, as you look across the intelligence community, women make up roughly 40% of the senior leadership positions in the intelligence community. Clearly, having women in these positions is highly motivating to others who are looking to careers in intelligence, because we know we can do it. And interestingly enough, these women that are in those positions also have reputations for being incredible mentors, which means they have developed their own networks, they have developed their own sort of cadre of women. And so it is a much more, there are many more opportunities now than there were when I started in the late 1980s.
What's problematic are the percentages. You know, I think that women are woefully underrepresented at the senior-most ranks of these companies, but also in the next layer down. I think that too often those who are pegged to be the future CXOs, the most promising high-rising talents, are men, sort of the proteges of the existing CEOs. So while I view women as having this overwhelming amount of good that they can bring to the workplace, I think we could be doing a whole heck of a lot better right now.
All of us who are mothers have had to juggle everything. And my children are adults now, but you can't forget, your babysitter gets sick, or the school calls and your daughter's throwing up in the nurse's office and you're at work. I mean, you have to juggle everything. And we can't change that family life, but to have some structure in place so that people can make their lives work. Family leave policies, for example, that make all the difference for American families.
I think the biggest issue for women in the workplace goes to the horrendous policies we have for maternity leave. Trying to reconcile being a mother with being a high-flying executive is near impossible.
I learned that while I have boundaries that are personal boundaries, there's some things that I'm not going to be able to do, in particular when my children were very young. While everybody has boundaries, balance shouldn't be something that is abnormal. You have to balance every day, and not every boundary that you have is going to be a limitation, so see past that.
The one thing I would change, if I could change it today, would be the income disparity. It's just such a tangible, quantifiable measure of how women are still not on the same level as men.
Early in my career, I wasn't always what the customer expected or my team expected. And the advice that I would give to women who might be struggling in this area would be on top of your game. Create a track record that is just irrefutable.
You are a generation of women who have to continue leading the change that was set up for you by your mothers and by your grandmothers.
Don't get distracted by what people might think or believe. Show them.
And I think you have to have a little bit of stick-to-itiveness in this business.
And if you are not continuing to pursue your education in science, technology, engineering, or math, or pursuing positions in those areas, we need you to do it.
Accept the fact that you're going to be in the minority.
We need you to be brave. We need you to give it a chance.
You are in the minority. You're going to continue to be in the minority, and allowing that to affect what you do or how far you go, I just think that's a shame.
Well-behaved women rarely make history. And I think that it's the case that well-behaved or docile employees rarely get the attention from the senior ranks.
We need you to help us complete this journey.